A country doesn't always have to fire a missile or impose sanctions or even send troops. Sometimes they just close a visa office and suddenly millions of people will feel it. That's what just happened between the United Kingdom and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And no, this isn't just about paperwork. This is about power. Remember, if you want more Africa First stories the Western media avoids, hit subscribe. We don't chase the headlines, we chase the truth. And by the end of this video, you'll understand how borders became one of the West's most effective weapons and why Africa is responding the way we are.
To settle in this country forever is not a right, but a privilege, and it must be earned. Today, that is not the case. Settlement, or indefinite leave to remain, comes almost automatically after 5 years' residence in this country. At that point, a migrant gains access to many of the rights of a British citizen, including to benefits. As a result of the unprecedented levels of migration in recent years, 1.6 million are now forecast to settle between 2026 and 2030, with a peak of 450,000 in 2028. It's around 4 times higher than the recent average. That will now change. As this government announced in its immigration white paper, the starting point for settlement will move from 5 years to 10. To ensure this is earned, new criteria will be added, which will act as a disqualifying bar for those who do not meet them. Firstly, the applicant must have a clean criminal record. Secondly, they must speak English to A-level standard. Thirdly, they must have made sustained national insurance contributions. And finally, they must have no debt in this country. While these criteria set the bar that everyone must meet, there are a series of other tests that have today been published for consultation, and these either add or subtract from the 10-year qualifying period. To recognise the particular value to society they play, the government proposes the following. Those who speak English to a degree level standard could qualify for a 9-year path to settlement. Those paying the higher rate of tax could qualify at 5 years, while those on the top rate could qualify after 3, the same as those on global talent visas. Those who work in a public service, including doctors, teachers, nurses, would qualify after 5 years, while those who volunteer, subject to this consultation, could qualify at between 5 and 7 years. Not subject to consultation, the partners of British citizens will continue to qualify at 5 years as today. And this is also true of British nationals overseas from Hong Kong.
All right, so the UK accused Kinshasa of refusing to cooperate with its expanded deportation framework. And the response has been immediate. Fast-track visas for Congolese officials have been revoked. Diplomatic privileges have been removed. Threats of border visa restrictions on Congolese citizens have been issued as well. So at the same time, the UK publicly praised Angola and Namibia for their cooperation. So sovereignty now available in compliant and non-compliant tiers. This wasn't a one-off dispute. This was a message, right? So the public is being told the official story sounds neutral. The UK is simply enforcing immigration law. And that sounds a little fair, right? Until you compare who gets flexibility, who gets patience, and who gets punished collectively, right? So this is tiered humanitarianism. Under the old UK asylum system, protection was longer, deportations were slower, the presumption leaned towards safety. Under the current system, fewer qualify for 5-year settlement, and many are pushed into 10-year routes. Visa switches, gaps, or overstays reset this clock. So in practice, people wait oftentimes 15 to 20 years. Asylum is now considered temporary and is reviewed every 30 months. Revoked once a country is labeled safe, right? But the real difference shows up in who gets these exceptions. So European specific flexibility is the prime example. So when conflict hit Ukraine, there was immediate protection, right to work, right to study, fast family reunification. For parts of Eastern Europe and the Western Balkans, there was quicker humanitarian pathways, faster, safe countries designations, no collective visa punishment. Now let's compare that to Africa. So African migrants face higher rejection rates, longer processing delays, collective visa retaliation, and aggressive deportation pressure. So asylum depends on where you're from, not just what you're fleeing. So here's what's often not explained, right? How diplomacy becomes harassment. Because when a country agrees to accept deportees, it removes the biggest obstacle to deportation, so country of origin refusal. Once that barrier is gone, travel documents move faster, detention becomes legally safer, removal targets become achievable. And when these targets become achievable, systems activate. So enforcement pressures move downstream. Police are essentially told free game for migrants, right? They're incentivized to detect more status violations, increase referrals, escalate minor infractions. That's why after return agreements, stops increase, document checks increase, removals spike. So when migrants say harassment increased overnight, they're not guessing. They're describing system activation. Return agreements don't order harassments, they just make it productive. So here's another part that people get wrong. Yes, English proficiency is often cited as helping migrants integrate faster, but language is not the reason Europeans become citizens faster. Language is the excuse. Permission is the cause. The UK didn't meet English-speaking Africans. It colonized Africa, forced English through schools, courts, and law, and extracted labor and wealth for generations. Today, the system claims language helps integration. But look closer. Europeans integrate faster because they oftentimes arrive with immediate or simplified right to work, permission to volunteer legally, recognized credentials, financial buffers, low law enforcement suspicion, right? African migrants, including fluent English speakers, do not. Africans are told, don't work, don't volunteer, don't rely on public funds, prove integration. But integration requires access. The system withholds the access, creates delay, then blames the migrants for not integrating. Britain forced the language, then closed the door. So Europeans don't integrate faster because they speak English, they integrate faster because they're allowed to. So the consequences are real. Deportees return oftentimes with no reintegration funding. African states absorb social and security costs. Students and professionals lose mobility overnight. And diaspora families are frozen by diplomacy. So Europe runs triage, Africa runs the recovery room. When visas become leverage and asylum becomes conditional, there's no longer immigration policy, it's hierarchical enforcement. So this won't end with Congo. African states are increasingly delaying travel document issuance, demanding higher verification standards, linking returns to reintegration funding, refusing blanket or rushed removals. This flips the logic from automatic obedience to conditional cooperation. In other words, deportation is no longer a favor, it's negotiation. So we can expect deportation cooperation explicitly tied to visa access for safe countries, and safe countries will be labeled and applied more selectively throughout this process. So migration policy replacing development diplomacy is Europe's main pressure tool, right? But Africa's adjusting. And here's where the next line is being drawn. So if returnees are going to continue, or returns are going to continue, African states are increasingly insisting they be funded honestly. Real integration costs money. A credible return would be between 10,000 and 25,000 pounds per person. So covering housing, stabilization, skills or business reintegration, and the social and security costs absorbed by the receiving state. Anything less is not cooperation, right? We'll just say that. So it's cost dumping. If Europe can afford to detain people for years, it can afford to fund their return. That argument is now on the table, quietly but firmly. Just as mineral contracts have been renegotiated, human movement is next. That's not rebellion, that's maturity. Borders don't just control movement anymore. They define who is protected and when asylum depends on proximity, permission, and colonial memory. Sovereignty becomes the shield, right? So, mashallah, that's your African insight for today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe because I'm Mr. Empower TV. We don't chase the headlines, we chase the truth behind them. This is Mr. Empower, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.